Welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, Anthony Wade. It is it's April 29th, but I'm probably not posting this till tomorrow since I already have one for today. For today's episode, we're going to go back to Southern California and Shane Idleman. Those who don't know, Shane is a up-and-coming MAGA pastor. He used to be considered pretty solid. Then he got hit upside the head with the COVID stick. And, since then he's been, all things MAGA and Trump. And, he may deny that, but it's obvious just looking at his page. If it's not, actual sermons he's preaching or fasting, which he's very involved with, which appear to be solid teachings, everything else is political. And it's only one side. So it's like transparently, ridiculously obvious. He reposts known political operatives and pretends like somehow it's Christian. So at any rate, I had gotten into a little bit with him today, actually, regarding his reposting of Nancy Brown's statement regarding the Dr. Michael Brown debacle. But in doing so, that led me to one other of his posts. He just posted this sermon, When to Obey God Over Government, which is, a pretty big warning sign from NAR dominionism, because, I'm sure Romans 13 is going to be invoked. Whenever the president is Republican, the NAR dominionists love Romans 13. And whenever it's Democratic, they hate it. It doesn't apply. And it sounds like that's where Shane's going to go with this, to suggest that, there are times when you just simply, disobey Scripture, because, he's going to use some examples of things that, may seem fair. But the bottom line is it's not our place to necessarily make the judgment about what is or is not politically, wise in terms of the counsel of God. For none seek after the Lord. Neither party cares about the cause of Jesus Christ. The policies are not Christian. And by the way, even if you can point to some that are, there's many that are not. So this is a long sermon. It's like over an hour, but we're not going to cover that. We're going to cover a 20-minute slice. I'm going to pick it up where he starts talking about COVID. Because it's very enlightening and provides us with a good look at why it's important for pastors to stay in their lane. Too many pastors think they're experts on everything, and they're not. Shane Idleman reopened his church during the height of COVID, as many MAGA pastors did. And in doing so, he will find out when he stands before Christ who he killed because of it. Make no mistake about it. I find it extremely difficult to believe that everybody escaped the COVID wood chipper that was his church. By the way, this is not picking on Shane. John MacArthur did the same exact thing. I'm reminded of Lawrence Sanford, who was a bit of a famous pastor himself. And Lawrence Sanford also opened up his church in the height of the pandemic, sticking his thumb in the eye of the authority because the authority was Democratic. And he bragged, nobody in my church is sick. Nobody in my church is sick. And then all of a sudden, everybody in his church got sick. Then Pastor Sanford got sick. And then Pastor Sanford died from COVID. 7 million people died during COVID. So it's easy to sit here 5 years after the fact and pretend suddenly that you're experts on everything that was happening back then, but you weren't. People were dying all over the world. I lost people. Shane says that he lost people. I am sure you lost people. Don't disrespect their memory by suddenly rewriting history and pretend that, we all should have known better. I hear this nonsense on television all the time too. This absolutely rewriting of, we should have known that, not letting our kids go to school was wrong. What? Were you around back then? Do you remember the bodies piling up in the hospital? We got to get over ourselves. I don't have a degree in virology. Neither does Shane Idleman. If I want a proper exegete of Hebrews, I might ask Shane because I know that he knows the Bible. But if I want to know the pattern of spread for a deadly plague, he's the last person I'm going to ask because he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, as we will find out in a second.
And other things, we saw this during COVID. Some of you are new. You don't know how it all went down. I mean, we were all like, okay, let's 2 weeks to flatten the curve. That sounds realistic. We'll be back in here in 2 weeks, right?
Now, just for certain, there's going to be a lot of revisionist history. That statement is absolute BS. It just, they were talking about 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and then they realized that that wasn't working. The curve didn't really get flat. Everybody kept dying. And listen, was the government right about everything? No. But they were trying to do the best they could, considering hundreds of thousands of people were dying.
That's all we need.
2 weeks, please.
And then you begin, okay, let's respect, let's honor the government, of course, and Fauci must be telling us the truth. Let's just come on, let's and so we just waited and we watched, and I'll never forget. I mean, I came and I preached on a Sunday to nobody, and I'm driving home like, why is that pot shop open? And donuts? I can get donuts?
Yeah. Do you know why, Shane? Because there wasn't 10,000 people in the donut shop, you idiot. Come on. Are we really going to go here? It's astounding to me, the level of disingenuousness people still insist on talking about what was happening in 2020. I mean, I can't justify why California allowed pot shops to stay open, but you can't compare a church that has thousands of people crammed into it, singing next to each other, spitting all over each other, to going and buying a dozen donuts. This, again, is why you stay in your lane.
I can go to Costco, 6 feet, 6 feet, 6 feet.
Correct. And you couldn't do that at church. That's the point.
Wait, Planned Parenthood on Palmdale Boulevard's open?
Oh, my goodness. Well, nothing like throwing a little red meat to the right-wing base, right? Might as well bring out like an abortion issue as if that has anything to do with the conversation we're having, which it doesn't. Planned Parenthood is not a church that holds 10,000 people crammed in together. Remember, the prohibition was not against churches. It was against public gatherings indoors with, and there was a certain person limit to it, which kind of makes sense.
Wait a minute. And then, of course, I get all kinds of, I know I have a lot of nurse friends. I can't say a lot, but at hospitals, like, they're texting me like, they just said this guy died of COVID. He didn't. And I go, wait, so they supposedly get 16,000 for a COVID patient, 36,000 for a ventilator.
That is just a despicable accusation from the mouth of a pastor that the hospital was claiming COVID deaths to get money.
Is this true? Are you kidding me? Like, why not just help people? Why do they have to be incentivized? And all these fake, numbers, and of course it was real. I don't discount it.
You just discounted it. You just called it fake. All these fake numbers. 7 million people died, Shane. 7 million. And you're glossing over it like it doesn't matter.
So there's some heavy things there.
Heavy things.
But you see all this manipulation. And so at what point does a church say, okay, based on what I see now, from the government officials and the truth, and Newsom at his restaurant up there, not masked up and not social distancing, and not.
Listen, I mean, the story of that was plastered all over right wing media. I can't defend why Gavin Newsom was not wearing a mask, but that doesn't change what we're talking about.
And their disdain against churches, how DeSantis is handling in Florida versus here, and you start to like.
Right. So some states were stupid. Florida is a good example of one that was stupid. In Florida, many churches like Rodney Howard Brown was one of the first ones who got back into action, and people died.
Okay, at what point is the church supposed to be the church?
Okay, and this is the other deception, right? This is the purpose-driven logic. The Purpose-Driven Church, written in 95 by Rick Warnock, The Purpose-Driven Life, was the blueprint for up-and-coming pastors, for the cult of personality pastors, of which Shane Idleman is one. And their church model relies on the public Sunday gathering, because that's where you collect the tithes. And without that, you can't keep the church open, because you're constantly trying to wait for the church that's coming. The Purpose-Driven Church tells pastors to budget not based on the numbers you have, but based upon the growth that you expect. And COVID threw a wrench into everything. Nobody was given anymore for obvious reasons. One, they had no money. Two, they were losing jobs. And three, it's a lot easier to not give if you're sitting at home and you're not in the church. So the reason why Shane Idleman, John MacArthur, Lauren Sanford, Rodney Howard Brown, and all the other people who stuck their thumb in the eye of authority and tried to pretend it was for piety, they were doing it for money. Make no mistake about it. The model of their church was not going to survive. Well, at what point do we stop being the church? Why does the church have to be a Sunday gathering? Why? There were plenty of pastors during COVID who still were the church, who did remote streaming, direct community outreach. You know what I'm saying? The church is not this fabricated hour and a half on Sunday.
And so all the elders, we agreed, like, okay, enough of this.
Yeah. I'm glad he admits it. So he got his elders together, who basically, are his yes men. And they all agreed, hey, we're dying on the vine here. So we need to throw Romans 13 out the window. Not because they're telling them to do something that was against God's word, because that's the other argument that you hear oftentimes, which is if the government says, like, you gotta like marry homosexuals, many pastors will be like, well, that violates God's word, so I won't do that. That's not what's going on here. They just didn't like what they were being told by the government. So they decided they're using pot shots were open. Pot shops. The governor was having dinner without a mask on, So for that reason, we can disregard Romans 13 and do whatever the hell we want.
It's and especially you just saw the ridiculousness of things.
Such as?
Ridiculous. Even at Jethawk Stadium, LA County said, okay, you need to be 12 feet away and don't sing.
Yeah, that's not funny. That's not funny, Shane. Mocking 7 million people who died is not funny. The bottom line is, at the time, the best science that could come up with was maybe, since COVID was transmitted through, it was an airborne expulsion from the mouth, that maybe you should be 12 feet apart, and maybe you shouldn't be singing, out into the atmosphere where everybody else is going to be breathing it in. Again, when you don't stay in your lane and you think now suddenly you're a virologist and you're a scientist when you're not, this is what you get.
You don't know how many, this was a stressful time.
I'm sure.
I'm like, and I we had some people leave because I didn't handle things real good. I was a little cocky and upset, I just lost my mom in Idaho. My sister and brother couldn't go visit her, even though they're 40 feet away. I was, and so the Lord taught me a lot through that.
I'm glad.
But I can't, that's silliness. And then our mayor got upset at me.
What's silliness? That the government gave recommendations that you didn't like? What are you basing it on? Just because you didn't like it, right? Because let's be fair, you don't know what you're talking about.
And if you don't know that, then I'm not going to put a big plexiglass right here. I don't spit that far.
That's not funny. Not funny, Shane. And you're going to find out when you stand before Jesus and find out how many people you fed into the COVID wood chipper. It's not a matter of spitting on them.
What is this? Cover all the seats. Cover all the seats with paint, whatever that, those thin, and then every service remove all the seating and only every other seat. I'm like, Dave remembers. I said, I can't do this.
Why? Why could you not do it? Why could you not do it? Now, granted, whether or not 5 years later we look back and think, yeah, that was a bad idea, the context of the time, you know context, Shane, right? The context of the time is that this was the ideas that the government was coming out with. And it's easy to say in 2025 that in 2020 we did something that maybe was, not the best science, let's say. But it's very, very disingenuous to pretend in 2025 that you knew full well back then. You had no idea. The bodies were piling up at the hospitals.
This is ridiculous. And we were all in agreement. We all felt, okay, Lord. And then out of the blue, Jack Hibbs texted me and said, hey, when do you think of opening? And I said, this is when. He goes, oh, we are too. And let's go.
Oh, well, goody. Jack Hibbs, the uber MAGA dominionist, says it's okay to reopen the church. Who cares?
Conference call, let's motivate some more churches. And so we all kind of...
Oh, good. So then you conspired to contact other churches and convince them to violate the Bible. Good.
Went out and did that kind of as a unified attempt. And I'll never forget, I was talking to my wife and my kids and like, this is what it could happen. If you guys, here's a password for stuff. If I happen to go to jail, and then people would mock me, even some that went here, like, hey, you're not going to jail. Don't over-exaggerate. Like, are you following the insanity? There's a possibility. Absolutely. And it was just...
nothing like describing the government trying to protect the people as insanity.
A time where you didn't know what, and I've got churches over the hill, like, Shane, they're saying you're disobeying the government. Romans 13.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know pastors, I don't know for certain, but they turned us into LA County.
You don't know for certain, but then you make the accusation anyway?
I'm like, guys, I'm just trying to have church.
In violation of state ordinance, Shane. And I might add, why couldn't you have church without forcing your sheep to come in together in the middle of a plague? Seriously? You had no other ideas? You had no technology? You had no way of doing direct community outreach? You couldn't be the church unless you forced them to come in?
Nobody was getting sick.
Nobody was getting sick. I'm sorry, Shane, but you're a liar. People got sick. Go talk to Lauren Sanford's wife and find out who got sick. Go talk to Joe MacArthur. He almost died from COVID. He hides it, doesn't want to talk about it because he knows he's wrong, but that's a fact.
Seasons will rend the heavens, but overall, we told people if you're sneezing, snick, please stay home. Let's use wisdom.
It's not wisdom to think that you know better than the scientists and virologists of the time who were trying to protect people. It's arrogance that you think that you did.
It's not like, I don't care about anything. No, use wisdom. Wash your hands if you don't feel well. If your kids don't check them, let's use wisdom. I think we should still do that.
And if people die, at least we used wisdom, right?
But it was like, what's that? I don't remember that lady's name. Stop the insanity. the weight loss lady for 1990s. Like, that's what I was screaming. And so that was a very real-time event of, and I have to be careful what I say in case they ever use it against us, but of not listening to government mandates. And you remember when it was churches are okay, you can open, but keep it at 10 people and under.
That's not funny.
But I just went, there's 500 in Costco. Help me understand.
Sure, no problem. Costco is a store, and people can legitimately be apart from each other in a large warehouse, which is what most Costcos are, as opposed to a church where you're sitting directly next to people and then you're spitting and singing at them, and everybody is huggy because Christians are huggy. It's night and day between the two. And by the way, as Shane continues to bash California, that his church is in California, but he doesn't like the fact that Democrats are in California, go look up the statistics, because people in red states got COVID at much higher rates than people in blue states. And because of things like this, because in blue states, they respected their government and they respected them trying to protect them. In red states, stuck their thumb in the eye and said, no, we know better. Rodney Howard Brown, I remember, said at the time, as a pastor, I'm the one better equipped to decide, when we should be able to go back to church. No, Rodney, you're not.
And most of them don't need to be in Costco. They need to be fasting.
Yeah, that's good. Mock them on top of it.
But I also know that a lot of the people we lost and people I lost were a lot of them had many underlying health issues because it's an immune issue.
This is, once again, a brilliant observation of why pastors should stay in their lane. Because, of course, any virus such as COVID is going to affect people who have underlying conditions. And I'm not entirely sure what percent of population has underlying medical conditions. Yeah, 25%, 28%, 68 million. So what the right wing tried to do, the political party that Shane aspires to, or agrees with, I should say, what they tried to do is pretend that people who got COVID, and the COVID exacerbated their underlying condition, whether it be diabetes or morbid obesity or a heart condition or whatever. They tried to pretend that COVID is not what actually killed them. What actually killed them was their underlying condition. Wrong. Insultingly wrong. Because the bottom line is that they didn't contract COVID, then the condition wouldn't have been exacerbated, and then they wouldn't have died. So it's insulting to the dead to sit there and blame them for their underlying condition and say, well, that's not really COVID.
It's an immune problem. So when you can build up natural immunity and when the body can be strong physically, that's the best defense.
Yes, but that wasn't the reality that people were living in back then, Shane, right? I understand that, Shane's always been a health advocate, and I think he used to be a bodybuilder. And he, does a lot of good preaching on fasting and, being a better steward of our physical health, and kudos. But not everybody's in that boat. And the bottom line is when COVID hit, it was a little late at that time to say, well, it's too bad, you should have been in better condition.
And I can get into a lot of other things, but that was a clear defining moment that I'm still processing. Because how can other Christians and churches saying I'm disobeying well, I guess in a form we were.
Absolutely. It just hit
And I remember talking to, again, I'm not going to mention names at the church over the hill. Shane, but we can't do that. We've already been told we'll lose all of our insurance and liability coverage. I don't think the early church had to deal with liability coverage.
They also didn't have to deal with COVID. What's your point?
And insurance. I got it. I understand. But what are we trusting in here?
Well, you're trusting in yourself, right? Because you're not trusting in the government. That's clear. You're not trusting in the scientists. You're not trusting in what the experts are telling you should and should not do. You're trusting and leaning on your own understanding, which is very, very limited because you have absolutely no experience in what you're talking about.
Because that, to me, that's not a church.
No, that's not a church. What's a church is somebody who defies Romans 13 to reopen it in the middle of a pandemic. To you, that's a church.
On fire for God.
Do you have to be physically at the building to be on fire for God? Because that's the implication.
And as a result, of course, this church grew tremendously through COVID, financially, in attendance, Jethawk Stadium. And then from there, hundreds and hundreds. And again, I stopped counting after about 300. So I'd estimate 500 people moved since COVID from this church that I knew. Elders, deacons, friends, staff. It was just the mass exodus of California. It was weekly, and so and living that and really going through that taught me what this whole concept is. So that's how it works with the government. They're supposed to be a restraining force. They restrain evil. And Paul, possibly written when he was imprisoned, he's imprisoned. He's still saying, obey the government. And he probably knew that Nero would read it. Who's Nero? Caesar. He's a Caesar of that time. So he would read this possibly and say, this is God's kind of reminding them, hey, you're a restraining force. And even in Rome, here's the thing. People think North Korea, yeah, that's really bad. But Rome, they actually weren't that bad in regard to restraining evil. They when somebody stole bread, they wrongly murdered. What Rome did was they worshipped the emperor. They worshipped false gods. But as far as allowing civil unrest and disobedience, they didn't put up with that. They were an arm of justice in that area. But then, of course, they hated Christians, and when you bow to Jesus, not Caesar, this is possibly the same Nero that would burn the Christians as candles throughout Rome. So many misquote the Bible on this topic. Again, like I said, the president isn't called to turn the other cheek, but to restrain evil. So next time you look at political things, make sure you look at what is the government's role? Because when they get their hands involved in the things that are not their role, it's hard. And I understand.
You mean like you keep putting your hands in things that are not your role, like determining, what to do in the middle of a pandemic. Is that what you mean? And while we're on the subject, Romans 13 is not the only Bible verse that deals with the government or what people in positions of authority should do. Read the Old Testament, Shane. God is constantly not very happy with leadership and how they treat the least in societies, the widows and the orphans. So it's not just he's actually trying to make the argument that, if you're just going to look at the president, don't look at all this other stuff that he does. Don't look at how evil his other policies are. Only focus on whether or not he is tough and, fighting, willing to go to war against other countries. And that's just a bastardization of the gospel.
Like the welfare system, I understand the benefits, actually. I understand the benefits of Section 8 when it's used correctly. That's the thing. When these things are used correctly, single mom needs help, a dad, hey, we're there to help as well. But that's actually the church's job.
Yeah, that's another NAR Dominionist talking point. The government shouldn't be involved in helping anybody. That's the church's responsibility. Thanks for playing. That's not correct or biblical. Okay? The bottom line, though, is you support policies and politicians who absolutely do not support helping people. And the church cannot possibly do the role of government, the role of protecting people, the role of helping people. Not to mention the fact that most in the charismaniacal church, it's only lip service they pay to helping people. I mean, yeah, don't get me wrong. There's plenty of churches who do a lot of good work, put on food kitchens and clothing closets, and run classes and stuff like that. But there's a lot of people out there, and a lot of them, by the way, are not going to go to a church because of the hypocrisy that the church operates in.
More than the government's.
Not true.
For example, if they made it more local, you could go to people and you could say, "Hey, have you found a job yet? Or how are you looking? There'd be more accountability." Right now, the system is so messed up, and some people need that assistance for a while. So I'm not against that, but just remember the role of government is to restrain evil. So when you
That's not the sole role of government, Shane.
rate a president or critique, look at that. Look. Okay, are they securing our nation? Are they?
Right. And honestly, let me cut through the political haze here of what he's trying to do. He is an ardent Donald Trump supporter. And on things like, I guess what he's talking about, which is like, protecting the country, Trump has more appearance to lean on, shall we say. So what he says, don't look at anything else. Don't look at how he's completely tanked the economy. Don't look at the fact that he's disappearing people to El Salvadorian prisons. Don't look at any of that. Don't look at how they wanted to cut Medicaid. Don't look at how they want to cut Social Security. Don't look at the 30,000 federal employees who no longer have a job and are going to lose their homes. Don't look at any of that. Just look at whether he's acting like a tough guy. That's the only thing that matters, according to Romans 13.
Fighting evil? Are they getting rid of certain things? And anytime, I don't know if you know this, but anytime you remove cancer, you also damage healthy things. So the process of what we're seeing unfold is not picture perfect. It's going to be ugly. You might remove some wrong people and people that should be here and break up some families. I'm against that. We need to throw.
It doesn't sound like you're against it. It sounds like you're saying, hey, you can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs, can I? Right? Am I right? Listen, it's these illegal brown people, they're like cancer, and sometimes when you're trying to take out like the bad parts of the cancer, sometimes you take out a vital organ, but you didn't mean to, So Jesus, right?
Really vet it. I got it. But you got to remove evil. You also it's
again, the fact that somebody came from another country, even illegally, doesn't make them evil.
Not a clean process. Why are we not upset at the people who created it?
Yeah, we should be upset at the poor people from other countries, despondent third world countries that are run by brutal dictatorships and gangs. We should be upset with them for daring to try to survive this life and crawl their way into this country so their kids might actually live. That's who we should be angry with, because we're Christians, right? That's what we should be angry with. He sounds like Jack Hibbs.
They're simply responding to an environment that wicked leadership has created.
Which wicked leadership? So, the bottom line is every president for the last 40 years has done nothing about the immigration system. I mean, unless you're saying they're all wicked, which I guess I would agree with.
And so that is the role of government. If we never see you again, then I know what side of the aisle you're on.
Think about that comment. Just think about the arrogance of that comment. Like, it's impossible for him to believe that somebody might have an independent thought and realize that this sermon is entirely self-serving and not of the Bible whatsoever. But instead, that person who disagrees must be on the other side of the aisle, because that's his worldview. His worldview is Trump good, everybody else bad. Republicans good, everybody else bad. And if you disagree with his idol and you don't want to worship his idol, then you've got to be on the other side of the aisle.
On this debate, and again, I'm against all kinds of any political party. It's what does God's word.
Really? You're against any other political party, any particular political party. I can't begin to tell you how absurd that is. I beg you, go visit Shane Idleman's Facebook page. You will see a lot of stuff about fasting and about health, which appears to be pretty good. You will see his sermons, such as this from his church, and you'll see other memes. But everything else, literally everything else, is right-wing talking points. It is like he's regurgitating like political provocateurs like Charlie Kirk. He went to the America Fest conference and live streamed it, where he got to listen to his idol Donald Trump, and he's when the fires are raging in Southern California, it was everything about the evil Democrats, and if only the Republicans were in. And so to sit there and pretend it's beyond the pale. It really is. I'm not kidding. Just please go to his page and see for yourself. See if you can find one pro-democratic post and count how many. And by the way, it was worse a couple of months ago. He actually posted that he was going to take a Twitter break and like a social media break because he realized that politics was becoming an idol to him. But then he went right back to it. So
it says, what does God's word say? For rulers are to be a terror to good works, are not to be a terror to good works, but to evil. Hey, so do you want to be unafraid of the authority? What great advice. Do what is good, and you'll have praise from the same, for he is God's minister to good for you.
But what if he's not, Shane? What if he's not? How do you, and he gets into North Korea as an example, but, like if you live in China or you live in, a Muslim country.
Or to you for good. How many of you watch these videos and you cringe of how these people talk to law enforcement when they get pulled over? It's like, just give them your license and you'll be gone in 5 minutes.
It's so insulting, particularly to minorities, to just pretend that if they just behave, if they just, say, yes, officer, and, just give him your license, like maybe you won't get tased. Maybe you won't get beat up. Maybe you won't have a police officer put his boot on your neck until you die.
What is going on?
It's just not an understanding of white privilege in this country. I make no bones about it. I mean, I'm lucky I don't have to deal with that. I'll drive, so I wouldn't be necessarily pulled over. But you can't deny the statistics, of the amount of incarceration versus the population.
Don't get out of the car and say, I'm filming you. What's your badge number? Now, if that needs to happen from time to time, absolutely.
He's got it all over the map here because he realizes when he says it, then it's insulting.
There's bad apples in every bunch.
Yeah, just the bad apples. Just a bunch of bad apples. So they taste you. Yeah.
Fire department, police, pastors.
Yep.
But when you throw the baby out with the bathwater, you have huge civil disobedience.
Yeah, but you're ignoring what the cause of it is. You're pretending somehow it's all laid at the feet of the victims.
I think we should teach all of our children respect and honor and have dignity.
Agree.
Because it says, do what is good and you will have praise from the same. Let's say somebody is mistreating you. This is coming to me. Let's just say somebody's mistreating you. Let's say it's law enforcement for the sake of argument. What happened to God in the equation?
I want to highlight this and the hypocrisy within the 13 minutes we've been listening to this. So the point he's making is, if you're being abused, let's say by a police officer or mistreated, that basically, God is still the ultimate justice. He's still in charge of everything. He still sees everything. And basically just, you should be able by faith to leave it to God. But he refused to do that 13 minutes ago when he was talking about COVID, right? Because the bottom line is, why didn't you just tolerate it, Shane? Why didn't you just say, well, Romans 13 says what it says, and my government's telling me to do X, Y, and Z, and if I've got to put the tape he said or something on each other chair and change it after each service, then I guess that's what I got to do, right? Because if they're wrong, if they're crazy, if they're being abusive on some level, then I don't have to worry because God's aware of it, right? How do you square that circle, Shane? 13 minutes ago, you have to judge for yourself. You have to decide for yourself when to violate Scripture, and then 13 minutes later, it's like, well, why do you care if a cop's abusing you?
You don't think God has your back? You don't see God? You don't think God sees what's going on?
Did God see what's going on in COVID? Did he have your back, Shane?
So this entity or person is stronger than God?
So Dr. Fauci was stronger than God? The California government was stronger than God? Gavin Newsom was stronger than God?
Trust God.
Yeah, why didn't you trust God?
But if you do evil, be afraid. So if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is God's minister, an avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. Guys, this is how the government is supposed to be. See, what the Bible does, it tells you how the government is supposed to be. Because in your mind, if you're like me, you say, what about North Korea then? Well, yeah, that's a tough one because they're so godless, even communist China. A lot of governments, when it says ordained by God, people say, how could North Korea be ordained by God? Well, understand the word and what it means in the context. The institution of government is ordained by God, not the godless character of the people, leaders. And this is why when it comes to America or any other nation, when people say, is America a Christian nation? Well, I can take you to the roots and the principles, but a nation isn't Christian or atheist. It's just a combination of it's her people. So what are her people? Are the people in politics? No political party, correct, is necessarily good or bad.
But you only support one. And by doing so, you confer righteousness onto it.
How can a donkey or an elephant be good or bad?
Well, just to be clear, they're both bad.
It's the character of the leaders.
Really? So it's the character of the leaders. And the man that you support and claim must be the Christian choice for everybody, Mr. Trump, is a convicted rapist with 34 felonies, 6 bankruptcies, cheated on his first wife, the second wife, his third wife with a porn star. And you think it's all about character. You see, this is the problem, because it is, or should be, all about character. But for the anti-Arminianist, it's not. Character is just, doesn't really matter, as long as you get, whatever legislation you think is right.
In particular parties. That's where the evil comes from. So God's saying he ordained the concept of government. Here's how the government is supposed to act. And because of that, you're supposed to submit to them because they are there to restrain evil. Now, that's the ideal. But that doesn't always happen. All right. If you're not convicted, you're about ready to get convicted. I wish I could take this out, but we can't. For because of this, you also pay taxes. Oh my goodness.
This is going to be the last section we cover.
You also pay taxes, for they are God's ministers attending continually to this very thing. See, and God's word is right. The concept is right. How are you going to pay for law enforcement, fire department, water, power? I mean, so you have to have people, the citizens, giving some of their resources, the customs and things to pay these things. How many of you are not aware, this will blow your mind. There was a time in our nation where you didn't have to pay income tax. How many of you didn't know that? No tax on your income. How cool would that be? Wow. Now, how was that possible back then? There's an interesting word that's real popular now. Tariff. Did you know that? We charge countries tariffs so you wouldn't have to pay taxes. What's a tariff? China.
Sorry for the cough. Water went down the wrong pipe. But obviously he's talking about this because his idol has wrecked the economy with these tariffs that he's laid out. Now, Shane's absolutely correct that the income tax was created, and prior to the income tax being created, tariffs were the primary source of revenue. The reason why income tax was created, however, is because tariffs were a never-ending source of corruption. Political leaders were able to basically sell their office to the highest bidder. Now, to a certain extent, that a lot of that still happens today through lobbying, but it didn't. He's kind of like saying tariffs good, taxes bad. It's not that simple. And believe me, I'd love to not pay taxes. But the reality is you're still paying one way or the other. Because the part that he's not going to mention is the tariff is still paid by you. It's not paid by the company.
You want to sell your products here? You're going to have to give us 10% of the income. Netherlands, Sweden, China, Mexico, by the way, you're going to have to give us, you're selling to our people. You're going to have to give us a portion of what you make. That way we don't have to put this burden on the people.
Yeah, except the burden still goes on the people because Mexico doesn't actually pay the tariff. The company that is trying to sell the goods has to pay the tariff. But they don't, what they do is they simply add the tariff to the price of the goods. So, if somebody's selling a product for $100 and a 10% tariff is imposed that makes them have to pay an extra $10, they'll simply charge $110 for the item. The company's not going to eat it. The company's going to make money one way or the other. So when you hear all this talk about tariffs, you're paying for it. And we'll start to see that pretty soon as prices start going up for every possible item.
And I won't go into all the details, but it's kind of complicated, but they begin to remove those tariffs in order to get more exports and imports. And it's it's a mess.
Yeah, he's also leaving out the fact that we too sell our products to other countries who then will impose tariffs on us.
For sure. It's like, wow, if I get a headache, I know you probably would too. We had no income tax. And then it was, 10%, 15%, 20%, 25%. Can you keep going?
Yeah, he must not have a firm understanding of tax history. In the 1960s, the top tax bracket was like 90%. So if you were like a billionaire, you paid 90% in taxes. Now it's 36% or something, 39% maybe. So it's much, much lower. Not to mention the fact that most people who are at that level have loopholes in the tax code that basically allow them to pay virtually no taxes, while the little guy always has to pay taxes.
Some of you are in that 40% bracket. Now that's healthy. That's not good.
That's not good.
So the reason that word is popular right now
40%
is because the government is trying to get back to charging nations for selling their products. Canada. Now, is that going to go smoothly? My goodness.
Message? Just let Trump be Trump. Don't pick on my idol. it's not going to go smoothly. He's only instituted a 145% tariff on China, where we get the majority of our products.
No. I was just talking to a tire store owner. Remember when Obama gave a tariff to China on rubber, I think it was, and tire prices. I remember this because I had a semi truck, 18 tires. It was like big difference. But then when the tariffs, I think, were lifted, some of the American distributors still raised the price gouging because of greed.
Yep.
So it's a very delicate, interesting thing. But if we're going to go to a certain spot where these countries stop taking advantage of us, it's going to hurt a little bit.
Yeah, that's the narrative of the Trump administration right now, is that we're all being taken advantage of, even though nobody felt that whatsoever. The economy was humming, and now you gotta put up a little short-term pain. So this has basically become a commercial for the administration and for their what appears to be right now at least failed economic policies. But I'm gonna stop the review there. There was a few primary portions I wanted to cover, especially the COVID stuff, because it's so infuriating to hear people in 2025 rewrite history about what was happening in 2020. I remember very well what was happening in 2020. It was probably one of the most frightening points in our lives. I remember watching the TV reports of the bodies just piling up in the hospitals. Is everything that the administration, which by the way was the Trump administration originally, and then the Biden administration, was everything that they were saying, has it borne out to be, a great idea? Like everything Dr. Fauci said? Probably not, no. You don't really know. You're using the benefit of, being, years removed from the plague to be able now to say, oh, well, we should have done X, Y, and Z. But, I try to have a little more grace for people who are in a very difficult situation and trying to come up with the best solutions on the fly, not using traditional scientific method because they didn't have the time to do that. So, if you got a pandemic that spreads through, oral, expulsion, then things like distancing and masks kind of makes sense. Now, if it's borne out like 5 years later that maybe that wasn't the best idea, okay, I can live with that. But don't go back and repaint 2020. I'm sorry, 2020, like you knew better. You didn't know better. And the bottom line is, large social gatherings were banned using even better science and better logic. And the bottom line is I guarantee you this: if Shane's church was in Kentucky, and Kentucky had a similar ban, Shane would not have reopened his church, guaranteed, because that would require him to go against his idol and against the political party that he ascribes to. The reason why it was convenient for him to do that is his church is in California. California is the biggest Democratic state in the country. He hates all the Democratic politicians. So who's better eye to stick his thumb into? But he hasn't been borne out to be correct. This is a very, very difficult time. I know people who died from COVID, and I'm sure you do. And it dishonors their memory to pretend that you had all the answers in 2020 and you knew better than Dr. Fauci. And this is one of the horrible consequences of our social media lives now, is suddenly everybody is experts. And I remember in 2020, everybody was a virology expert, now everybody's an expert on tariffs, Suddenly everybody has an economics degree I was unaware of. Just, it just becomes more unseemly when pastors don't stay in their lane. Because Shane Idleman doesn't know anything about COVID. He doesn't know anything about virology. He doesn't know anything about pandemics. All he knows is his church was closed and he wanted it reopened. And even if it was a subconscious desire, tithing had a lot to do with it, because he needed to get people back into his church back into giving into the offering. Um, Same thing for John MacArthur. Same thing for Lawrence Sanford. Is the purpose-driven model requires the Sunday meeting. But the church in the book of Acts wasn't all about necessarily having to gather together, right? They didn't have social media. There were plenty of churches who did not reopen right away, as Shane's did, and still managed to be the church. Still managed to do direct community outreach to their sheep. Still managed to support them, to call them, make sure things were going okay, give them help if they needed help, counseling and prayer. They were still the church. Plenty of churches live streamed and sent out. I'm assuming he was originally. He said that he was preaching to no one, so I'm assuming he was doing that for the sake of recording and then he was posting it. Great. So then you were still trying to be the church. Romans 13. The go-to verses when you like the guy in office. When you don't like the guy in office, it's well, when should we obey the government? When should we obey God over the government? Except the examples and scenarios that are cooked up are always within our subjection. It's always our subjective view. Well, I don't agree with the policy of that administration, so therefore I'm going to say it's not of God. And since it's not of God, I'm allowed to basically disobey Romans 13. That's the logic. Except that's not what Romans 13 says. And to pretend that the only verse in the Bible that deals with leadership, governmental leadership, is Romans 13 is also not accurate. God is constantly against leadership that does not treat and take care of the least of those in society, which, by the way, Shane's party, not very good at. No. You can talk a good game about how you think that you understand why public assistance is needed or Section 8 housing, but at the end of the day, the code words that he threw in were like, like a short period of time, and it's temporary, and the church should really be the ones doing it. So anyway, leave a comment if you like. Give it a thumbs up. Tell your friends. I think we're at 75 subscribers in a couple of months. It's not bad. Subscribe to the channel, and thanks for stopping by. Test everything and hold fast.